Welcome to Eye on Korea, a video podcast produced by the Korea Economic Institute of America. Join us for in-depth conversations with experts and policymakers as we explore issues in Korea's economic and political relationship with the United States and how these issues may influence South Korea's regional strategies and its global relationships. I'm Scott Snyder, President and CEO of the Korea Economic Institute, and today I'm joined by Don Graves, former Deputy Secretary of Commerce in the Biden administration. Don Graves was the 19th Deputy Secretary of Commerce, where he led policy development on a range of issues, including national security, bilateral trade, industrial strategy, and commercial space development. He is currently a fellow at the Georgetown University Institute of Politics and Public Service. Thank you, Don, for joining us today.
It's wonderful to be with you, Scott. Thanks so much.
And this is a great time for us to reflect on what you were doing at the Commerce Department during the Biden administration. And also, of course, we're interested in what has happened during that period in the U.S.-Korea economic relationship. There was the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Office, creation of the CHIPS Office, which induced billions of dollars of investment from Korea. The Indo-Pacific economic framework was very important for supply chain warning systems. And the U.S.-Korea supply chain and commercial dialogue was established. What, in your view, are the biggest successes for the U.S.-Korea economic relationship that were achieved during the Biden administration?
Well, let me just start by saying that I think the U.S.-Korea longstanding deep relationship was strengthened probably to the greatest extent that it had been in terms of our commercial relationship, the bilateral investment. And you saw that as a result of the extraordinary increase of commercial investments, the volume of investments in both countries by each other. It's why, for instance, you saw the huge level of major plant announcements in things like EVs and batteries, in a whole range of critical and emerging technologies here in the U.S., because there's a recognition that the depth of our relationship benefits us both. That when we find ways to invest with each other, we can be stronger together. And the world is a challenging place these days, so it's good to be close to your best friends and partners and find ways to deepen that relationship.
Yeah. And of course, there were over $140 billion of investment pledges from Korea during the Biden administration. I never thought I was going to see that figure. What do you see as the strongest sectors for the relationship at this point, and which are the ones that you take particular personal pride in seeing having developed in that way?
So I think the areas of clean technology, critical and emerging technologies, so EVs and battery manufacturing, and a range of companies involved in the semiconductor industry. Obviously, we had a heavy emphasis on these emerging technologies and trying to bring back more of the semiconductor production to the United States. The depth of investment here in the U.S. Was astounding from Korea. And I think that there's a recognition that the U.S. market is a massive market, and the stigma that may have been attached to Korean products in decades past is no longer there. Korean companies are manufacturing some of the best, if not the best, products out on the market today, that there is a real need for the innovation that Korean companies are driving today. And so I think we had a real success there. And I go back to one of the things that you pointed out, the creation of the supply chain and commercial dialogue actually was really focused on the challenges that we all faced coming out of the pandemic, recognition that our supply chains not only could be disrupted more easily than I think most people expected, but that there was a need to bring some of those supply chains closer to either where the production was happening or the eventual consumer. And so it was really important for U.S. companies to that were working with Korean companies to bring those companies to the U.S. or in the cases of the OEMs for those companies in Korea to come to the U.S. and vice versa. It's not one way amount of trade and investment. U.S. companies certainly recognize that the Korean market was a good one, and that frankly locating facilities in Korea with access to the Asian-Pacific market was also really useful to U.S. companies. So it certainly was a case of mutual benefit. And I think where we're going, you'll see more with AI. I think you'll see more as it relates to things like robotics. The Korean market is actually a really good one. Obviously, it's dealing with some demographic challenges among some other challenges, but that actually leads to, I think, some good innovation that American companies can benefit from.
Okay. Let me drill down on the CHIPS Act, because that's one that I think is of particular concern. The Trump administration may go in a different direction. What would you say about the importance of sustainability related to the provision of subsidies to try to reestablish an industrial base in the semiconductor sector?
Well, as I think everyone realizes, semiconductor industry was started in the United States. That's why Silicon Valley is named what it is. At one point, we had a large portion of the production here in the United States. Even just a few decades ago, we were producing 40% of the world's chips. Today, we're at about 12%, little more than zero of the most advanced chips. It was absolutely critical for us to be able to have more of that production here in the United States so that we weren't held hostage to adversaries in the event of a geopolitical crisis, but also because of the potential of supply chain disruptions, to have more production here in the U.S. The challenge that we had was that the PRC, for instance, had been investing hundreds of billions of dollars in repatriation of some of that production in China. There are other countries around the world that were providing incentives to attract production. So there was no incentive to bring that production to the United States. So we had to provide at least a little bit of that incentivization to get companies to come to and bring their facilities and production to the U.S. And that's why you saw the passage of the bipartisan, very widely bipartisan CHIPS and Science Act provided us with about $50 billion worth of funding to lever up investment from companies both here in the U.S. as well as companies from abroad to bring their production and design to the U.S. That small amount, it sounds like a big number, but when you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars from other countries, it actually is not all that much. And the fact that we were able to get hundreds of billions of dollars of commitments from companies from all over the globe, including from Korea, with small amounts of incentive and commitments towards high labor standards, towards things like childcare, which is critical in this country, towards workforce development, and a commitment to use U.S. suppliers, that actually has, I think, a very beneficial impact on local and regional economies and, of course, the overall U.S. economy. So it was absolutely vital for us to have that incentive involved in attracting those companies. They wouldn't have come otherwise.
Okay, but it seems like in the course of this transition from the Biden to the Trump administration, it appears that we're switching from subsidies, the use of carrots, to tariffs, the use of sticks. How do you think that is going to impact the appetite of foreign companies to invest in the United States? And what sort of adaptations would you recommend that Korean companies consider in that context?
So I keep a card with me. I've carried it for years that lays out what I think are the foundations of a prosperous and equitable world economic order. And there are things like shared democratic values, adherence to the rule of law, protection of worker rights, protection of intellectual property, creative capital markets. And at the bottom, I have three words: transparency, clarity, and predictability. That's what companies need to be able to make rational decisions around where they're investing. I think that as it relates to tariff policy, having a careful, well-articulated and calibrated tariff policy to deal with economic coercion by competitors or bad actors is a useful tool, but it shouldn't be used as a hammer to bully our partners and allies, certainly. And I think that having constructive conversations is a more useful approach where there's mutual respect and dignity in the relationship. I think that what we're finding, and this has changed even over the last few days, is that the current administration is recognizing that the lack of clarity, the lack of predictability is providing, I think, a significant amount of volatility into the marketplace, and that corporate leaders, both here in the U.S. and globally, are having real concerns about whether or not it makes sense to operate and invest in the U.S. market, that it's causing challenges. And so what we're beginning to hear is that there's a bit of a pullback on what the administration is planning to do next week with their tariff policy, not using it so much as a sledgehammer, but beginning to use that just as a means to get people to the table to negotiate more effectively and have, again, that more calibrated tariff policy that uses tariffs as a one tool in a broader toolbox of economic policy. And I think that their tax policy ideas will also be in furtherance of that same set of strategies. It's just a different approach than what we did. Tax policy could be an incentivization or a sweetener in addition to using that tariff policy.
Okay, well, in that context, and in advance of April 2nd, we've seen this announcement this week by Hyundai to come in and make some additional investments, I think upwards of $20 billion of investment pledges, including the construction of a steel plant in Louisiana, some LNG purchase commitments. And of course, what caught my eye was the location, Louisiana. Right. And of course, Korea, under the IRA, did some investments they did a significant amount of investments in red states. They were also in blue states. But what do you make of Hyundai's decision, particularly in advance of April 2nd? Because we don't know yet what's going to happen with the auto sector. And what is your expectation for how that might play out?
Well, I will say that Chairman Chung has been, I think, a very thoughtful and strategic executive chairman and leader of Hyundai, and this is part of a longstanding commitment to invest in the U.S. along with their investments in Korea and other parts of the globe, but a recognition that the U.S. market, even despite some of the volatility right now, has been a longstanding, stable market. The U.S. consumer is very good, even in times of economic weakness, and so it's really a doubling down on belief that the U.S. market is a good place in which to invest. And I think that we saw a number of these investments over the last 4 years that they're investing all over the place in the United States. I suspect that Louisiana was chosen because Louisiana made a great case. The companies, in addition to thinking about federal policy, are looking at those local communities, those states that are putting together the best packages, that are providing them with guarantees around workforce, commitments around funding, logistical issues, and knowing that they have facilities in states like Georgia, which is not all that far from Louisiana, and that Louisiana provides access to the southern port. It gives them maybe the flexibility that they needed, along with those economic incentives from the state. But I don't think it should be any indication of, well, they're not going to go to states that may be perceived as blue versus states that are red. Louisiana's had a Democratic governor for many years. In recent years, Georgia has a Republican governor but has Democratic senators. So I think that what they're seeing is they're looking for the best site for what they're trying to achieve and closest to both their other production facilities as well as the offtake.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Another question or another challenge, I think, that a lot of Korean firms are facing is the change in the context related to energy policy and the energy transition. And President Trump has moved to this framework of energy dominance. And so that changes the mix in terms of what Korea might do with the United States in the energy sector. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think that one thing that folks don't always realize is that the United States is the world's largest producer of oil and gas by far. And that was the case last year. We produced more oil and gas than we've ever produced as a country. So the notion that increasing drilling is going to change the nature of energy production and access is a little bit of, I think, not absolutely correct. The real issue for us here in the United States is the access to the right types of oil and the plants across the country that are converting that oil into the products that they're going to use for production purposes. We don't have the refineries that are necessary to turn oil that comes out of the ground here into products that can be used by our companies. So we ship most of our oil and a large portion of our gas abroad. And then that means that we have to import the type of oil, the petroleum products that we need from other countries where those refineries may be located. So I think what you're seeing from the Department of Energy and from the administration, even though the president is saying drill, baby, drill, is actually a focus on refinery capacity. I do think that despite the president's disclaimers about his discomfort with clean energy, with solar, wind, et cetera, we're at a point where that ship has sailed, so to speak, that clean energy is going to continue to increase. The world is outside of the United States is moving towards clean energy. Even the Chinese recognize that, and that's why they're dominating the battery market right now. So I think that the Korean investments in clean energy, like battery production, are actually continue to be a smart investment that will pay off down the road. You can't unwind the investment in EVs. Those are here to stay. They may not move quite as the shift to EVs may not happen quite as rapidly as it was going to happen before. But I actually think that we are that long-term investment for the U.S. is one that will help us remain energy self-reliant and will allow us to have the diversity of industries and products that will serve us well into the next couple of decades.
You've mentioned China a couple of times, and of course, under the Biden administration, there was a strengthening of coordination on export controls. We also see greater restrictions in terms of what China can do in terms of selling to the U.S. market, at least related to connected vehicles. What do you foresee as related to the role of export controls and the importance of allied cooperation in that context?
Well, as I said before, we have to engage with our partners and allies. That's the United States is a big player, the biggest player perhaps in the world economy. But when it comes to things like imports, we are, I can't remember the exact number. It's somewhere in 11 or 12% of the world market. So we're large, but the world is a vast place, and we don't control the entire commercial marketplace. So it's absolutely vital for us to engage with our partners and allies. So when you're thinking about actors like the Chinese, which engage in some amounts of economic coercion, which don't always play by the same international rules as we and our allies do, it's really important for us to act in a coordinated fashion. That's why we imposed the export controls, but did it in a way where we were very much aligned with our partners. It's why we worked so closely with the Korean government, the Japanese government, our European allies, certainly on export controls around microelectronics, because our companies shouldn't be put at a competitive disadvantage, because if we aren't aligned and in sync, the companies in Europe and other places may just sell into the marketplace and undercut our companies. And I think that recognizing that there's a world market for a lot of these things, like steel and aluminum, for instance, it's really important to recognize that the Chinese at times are dumping into our markets, and it's hurting the Korean companies, it's hurting U.S. companies and others. So we have to work in a coordinated fashion. Why having tariff policies aligned with export controls, along with other trade restrictions, are things like the use of both CFIUS and outbound investment screening. That all has to be done in complete sync with our partners and allies so that we get this done the right way and don't end up in a trade war with our partners and allies. Or I think it would be a mistake to go into a trade war with the Chinese. I think that they certainly don't always hold up their end of the bargain. And we can have those hard conversations, but we have to be mindful of the broader world economy at the same time.
Okay, great. So the last thing I really want to ask you about is AI.
Yes.
We had the AI Seoul Summit back in May of last year, and a focus on trying to build a norm around safety and governance. Where do you think is the what do you think is the prospect for closer cooperation between the U.S. and South Korea in the area of AI governance, setting the rules of the road, and of course, there's a broader context to that as well?
Absolutely, I think it is absolutely critical for the U.S. and Korea to be aligned as it relates to the development of standards, practices, both internal to our countries as well as internationally as AI develops. It's very difficult, even with the smartest thinkers around AI, to know exactly where the technology is going to go. The advancements that are being made on almost a daily basis are sometimes stunning. I know that a lot of people were taken by surprise by what the Chinese did with DeepSeek, and I think that those advancements are moving at almost an exponential pace. So that's why it's really important for privacy, for safety, for cybersecurity reasons, for us to be in complete sync. The U.S. and Korean technology companies are some of the leaders in the world, if not the leaders in the world in not just AI, but the technologies that enable AI. So things like semiconductors, things like quantum computing, and actually I should say quantum computing, quantum information science. If we thought that AI was the game changer, quantum is going to be the thing that no one fully appreciates what it can do to enable. It's the enabling technology for things like AI. So we have to be in sync with our partners in Korea and get that right. And if we set the standards and the rules of the road with partners like Korea, then it means that we can at least provide some reassurance to consumers, to companies that technologies are safe, they're secure, they're sound, consumers aren't being taken advantage of. There's protection around use of data, which is absolutely vital for things like large language models. So we have to be in sync as we're moving forward together. The U.S. and Korea alliance is, I think, one of those vital alliances for the world and certainly for the world economy going forward.
That's a great note on which to end. Don, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it was absolutely my pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of Eye on Korea. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like the podcast, subscribe so you won't miss the next one, and leave a review to help others discover the show. Follow the Korea Economic Institute of America on social media or visit keia.org for more resources, events, and expert analysis on Korea. We'll see you next time on Eye on Korea.